Imagine leaving church on a Sunday. You come home, you talk to your mother, your phone rings, a friend invites you to a birthday celebration, and you think, I'll be back. But you don't come back. Instead, hours later, you're found unconscious on the other side of the road. Not near the party, not near your home, but about 3 kilometers away. And your injuries are so severe that your family is left asking one question. What happened to Mercy Wanjiru Kimani between the last CCTV image of her alive and the moment someone left her by the roadside? 23-year-old Mercy had gone out to celebrate. She never made it home. And today we are walking through the timeline, minute by minute where we can, because somewhere inside those missing hours may be the answer to who did this to her.
Twisted tales in every folder. Truth runs hot while the trail gets colder. Crime dopers, we don't look away.
Hey Crime Dopers, welcome back to Crime Dopers, where crime meets truth. I'm your host, Wanja, and today we're talking about the case of Mercy Wanjiru Kimani, a 23-year-old woman from Ruai, Nairobi, whose night out in January 2026 ended with her being found critically injured along Mombasa Road. Mercy would spend months fighting for her life. Her family would spend months trying to understand what had happened. And when Mercy eventually died from those injuries, the questions didn't die with her. They multiplied. Who was the last person to see Mercy? Why was she left alone? Who encountered her after she walked away from the club? How did she end up inside or near a vehicle? And perhaps most importantly, why has so much of this timeline remained unexplained? The public reporting available on the case describes a family demanding answers and a thorough investigation into what happened after Mercy left the entertainment venue. So, as always on Crime Dopers, we're going to separate what we know, what has been reported, and what remains unanswered. And because this is a story involving severe violence against a young woman, I'm going to keep the descriptions respectful. Mercy was more than the way she died. She was somebody's daughter, somebody's sister, somebody's friend. And before she became a headline, she was just living her life.
Tunashuka barabara tunaenda pipeline. Tuko kote tunamtafuta, tunaulizia, tunaenda police station, tunauliza hata watu wa pikipiki kama washaona msichana anakaa, tunamwaelezea, tuna describe venye anakaa.
Let's go back to Sunday, January 18th, 2026. According to accounts from Mercy's family, the day started normally. Mercy attended church with her mother, Zipporah Kimani, in Ruai. And that's important because there was nothing about the beginning of that day that suggested it will become the beginning of a nightmare. After church, Mercy went home. Then came the phone call. A friend invited her to a birthday party celebration. The party was a tunnel lounge along Mombasa Road. Mercy decided to go. Her mother reportedly wasn't enthusiastic about the idea. She had concerns. But Mercy wanted to attend the celebration and really think about how ordinary that sounds. A 23-year-old woman, a birthday party, friends, music, a night out. Nothing about that decision on its own should have ended with the family sitting in a hospital waiting for answers. But that's exactly where this story eventually went. Public reports identified Tunnel Lounge along Mombasa Road as a location where Mercy had attended the birthday celebration. And this is where the first major piece of evidence enters the story, CCTV. According to the case material and media reports, surveillance footage showed Mercy inside the club with her friends. She was alive, she was moving around, she was participating in the celebration. There was nothing on those images suggesting that she was about to become the victim of an attack that would nearly take her life. And then the night started changing. Now, this is where the timeline becomes incredibly important because investigators don't have to start with nothing. There is reportedly CCTV footage. There are people who are with Mercy. There are transport movements. There is the location where she was eventually discovered, and there is a gap between those points. According to the case material provided for this episode, Mercy was seen at the lounge late into the night. At some point, her friends left. One account says they left together in an Uber. Mercy stayed behind. And now, you have to pause here because this isn't about blaming her friends. We don't know everything that happened. We don't know what each person was thinking. We don't know whether anyone believed Mercy had another way home. But from an investigative perspective, this moment matters because Mercy went from being surrounded by people to being alone. And that changes the entire risk picture. Outside the club, another CCTV moment reportedly captured Mercy trying to get a boda ride. She was wearing a pink outfit with a black and white jacket. She attempted to negotiate the fare with the rider. They apparently couldn't agree. The rider picked another passenger and Mercy was left behind. Think about that image. A young woman late at night along a major road trying to find her way home, and then she walks away alone. This is one of the most important moments in the entire case because after that, the trail becomes dark. Her phone reportedly went offline and the documented trail becomes much thinner. Now, that gap is what I keep coming back to because we know where Mercy was and we know where she was eventually found. But what happened in between? Who encountered her? Who approached her? Did someone offer her a ride? Was she forced into a vehicle? Did she know the people who eventually harmed her? Or did she simply encounter the wrong person at the wrong time? These are not questions we should answer ourselves. They are questions an investigation has to answer.
Nikaona namba mgeni na nipigie, nikapik. Kaniambia, sasa hapo ulikuwa umepost msichana amepotea. Kamwambia akaniambia kuna Monday ya date 19th alikuwa anatoka job akapata ni msichana amerushwa, ni kama kutupwa hapo, na alikuwa tu msafi na kabag kake hapo. So picha nilitumiwa ilikuwa yeye ametupwa hapo mahali chini amelala.
It was the following day when Mercy was found, about 3 kilometers from the lounge, near the Ramtons area along Mombasa Road. She wasn't simply lost. She was unconscious. She had suffered catastrophic injuries. Reports describe a deep wound to her head, severe injuries to her lower abdomen, and both arms had been broken. Later accounts from her family also describe serious injury to one leg. I'm not going to dwell on the graphic details because sometimes true crime storytelling can become so focused on the brutality that we forget there is a human being at the center of it. But the injuries do matter because they raise an obvious question. What kind of event produces injuries like this? Was Mercy attacked where she was found, or was she injured somewhere else and then transported? The case material supplied for this episode includes a reported witness account that Mercy appeared to have been thrown or dumped from a vehicle near the Ramtons building. That allegation has enormous investigative significance if independently established, because if someone transported Mercy and dumped her there, then the roadside may not be the primary crime scene. It may simply be where the perpetrators decided to leave her, and that means the real crime scene could be somewhere else. A vehicle, a building, a compound, an isolated road, a location investigators may not yet have publicly identified. That distinction matters because crime scenes tell stories: blood patterns, CCTV, fingerprints, DNA, vehicle tracks, mobile phone locations, witnesses. Every detail can become a thread, and sometimes one thread is enough to unravel the entire case. But there was another tragedy unfolding at the same time. Mercy's family didn't know where she was. They knew she hadn't come home. They knew they couldn't reach her, and they began looking. The family searched around the areas where they believed Mercy might have gone. Eventually, a community connection helped break the deadlock. A pastor associated with the Ramtons area reportedly saw images of an unidentified, badly injured young woman and contacted the family. That lead eventually helped them locate Mercy in hospital. And think about what that means. Imagine searching for your daughter, calling people, checking places, trying to figure out whether she's safe, and then discovering that she's been lying in hospital, critically injured and unidentified. That's a different kind of nightmare, because the family isn't simply asking, where is she? Now they're asking, who did this to her and why?
Amekaa hospitali for 3 months, 1 week. Tunaona wakati mwingine yako sawa, amekaa kupona, wakati mwingine amezidiwa.
Mercy was initially taken to a local medical facility before being transferred to Thika Level 4 hospital, where she was admitted to intensive care. She was in critical condition, and according to reports from her family, she remained there for roughly 3 months. 3 months. Think about that. 3 months of waiting, 3 months of hoping, 3 months of wondering whether she would wake up, 3 months where the family didn't just have to process what had happened, but had to live with not knowing why. And while Mercy was fighting for her life, the questions around the night she was attacked remained. Who was responsible? What happened after she left that club? Who saw her? Who transported her? Who knew she was vulnerable? Who could have information that might finally explain the missing hours? And according to the family, one particularly painful issue was the silence from the friend who had invited Mercy to the birthday celebration. Her family has publicly questioned why that friend did not come forward with an explanation of what happened that night. Now, let's be careful here. Silence is not proof of guilt. Not answering questions does not automatically make somebody a suspect. Yeah, people react to trauma differently. People disappear from situations for reasons we may never understand. But from an investigative perspective, anyone who was with Mercy shortly before she disappeared could potentially have information. And investigators have to follow every lead. Not because someone looks guilty, but because they might know something. Now let's go back to that night, okay? Mercy goes to a birthday party. She's with friends. The group eventually leaves. Mercy remains. She tries to get a boda. The ride doesn't happen. She walks away, and somewhere after that, something changes. Now that's where the mystery is. Not the party itself, not the birthday, not the fact that Mercy went out. The mystery is what happened after the last confirmed sighting. And that's where the CCTV footage can be so important. Because CCTV doesn't have opinions, it doesn't speculate, it simply records movement. If footage exists from the club, and footage exists from nearby businesses, and footage exists along the road, investigators can potentially reconstruct a route. Maybe not perfectly, but enough to narrow the possibilities. A vehicle passes, a person walks, a motorcycle stops, a phone connects to a tower, a camera catches a license plate. One small detail can turn a mystery into a timeline, and a timeline can turn a suspect into a person of interest.
When you invite huyo msichana hata hajai reach out kwa kina mama, like hata waambie mama Mercy mimi nilinvite Mercy na kukaenda hivi na hivi, ama tajilete, but mtu akikeep distance, what does that mean? Say I'm judging her, but mimi hakuna vile nitasikia rafiki yangu nimemuinvite mahali na kitu kimemfanyikia na I won't even follow up. Yeah, she has never shown na hapa jai kutokea hapa.
Now here's where Mercy's story enters a much bigger Kenyan conversation. Because while her family was searching for answers, Kenya was already confronting a growing crisis involving gender-based violence and killings of women. In January 2026, a report on femicide in Kenya documented at least 220 women and girls killed during 2025, describing widespread patterns of violence, missed warning signs, and institutional failures. And just days before Mercy's story even began receiving national attention, Kenya's Technical Working Group on Gender-Based Violence and Femicide called for GBV and femicide to be treated as a national crisis, requiring coordinated action. That context matters, but it is also important not to take a leap. We cannot automatically say Mercy's case was connected to other killings. There's no public evidence establishing that, and we shouldn't manufacture a connection simply because the cases happened in the same country or around the same time. But there are similarities in the questions they raise. How safe are women when they're alone at night? What happens when someone disappears? How quickly does the system respond? What happens to evidence in the first few hours? And what happens when families don't have the resources or information needed to push an investigation forward? Now, one of the cases that emerged shortly after Mercy's disappearance involved another 23-year-old woman in Nairobi. Her name was Ann Muthoni Ngujiri. Hopefully, we'll be able to cover her case in another episode. Now, on February 1st, 2026, Ann was found dead inside her rented room in Mihango. Police said she had suffered a serious stab wound. Her boyfriend, identified in media reports as Bernard Mutiso, a serving GSU officer, was reported to have been the last person seen with her and subsequently became the subject of a police manhunt. According to reporting, friends had previously described the relationship as violent and controlling, including allegations that Ann had suffered abuse. Again, different case, different circumstances, different alleged perpetrator, but the age is striking. Both were 23, a young woman trying to build her life in Nairobi, and another family suddenly forced to ask why she wasn't protected. The Ann Muthoni case also highlights something very different from Mercy's case. Mercy's mystery centers heavily on a missing window of time outside a nightlife venue. Ann's case reportedly centered on violence occurring inside a place that should have been safe, her own home. And that tells us something important. There isn't a single location where women are at risk. It can be the road, it can be a relationship, it can be a house, it can be a place where someone should feel completely safe. And then in May, another incident shook Nairobi. Nairobi woman representative Esther Passaris publicly revealed that one of her young supporters had been attacked after attending an ODM rally in Dandora. According to Passaris, the woman was robbed, raped, and stabbed. This happened months after Mercy's attack. So again, I want to be very clear. There is no evidence publicly establishing that these incidents were committed by the same people, but they became part of the same national conversation. Women moving through Nairobi, women attending social events, women traveling home, women trusting people around them, and families left asking, how did this happen? When you put these stories side by side, you don't necessarily get one criminal pattern, you get something else. A pattern of vulnerability, a pattern of unanswered questions, a pattern where the first hours of an incident can become incredibly important. And this is where Mercy's story becomes particularly troubling, because her final known movements were captured. There's reportedly CCTV, there was a transport interaction, there was a location where she was found, there were people who had been with her, there was a medical trail, and there was a family searching. Those are leads, not rumors, leads. The question is, what was done with them? Let's imagine the timeline once again, okay? It's late Sunday, Mercy is celebrating, she's surrounded by friends, then the group leaves, Mercy remains, a boda negotiation doesn't work, she's alone, she walks away, her phone becomes unreachable, and then nothing, until she's found injured 3 kilometers away. That gap is the heart of this case, and I want you to sit with that. Because if investigators could reconstruct those missing hours, what might they find? Maybe a vehicle, maybe a person, maybe a meeting, maybe a confrontation, maybe a place where the attack happened, maybe the person who knows exactly what happened to Mercy. The truth could be hidden in a CCTV camera that nobody thought was important, a petrol station, a hotel, a supermarket, a private residence, a traffic camera, a security guard, a boda rider, a matatu driver, a phone tower, a vehicle registration, a single witness. Crime investigations are sometimes solved by dramatic breakthroughs, but more often, they're solved by tiny pieces of information finally being connected. Let's pause here for a moment, okay, and separate fact from speculation. Now, this is what is publicly reported. Mercy Wanjiru Kimani was 23 and from Roy. She attended a birthday party celebration at tunnel launch along Mombasa Road. She was later found unconscious approximately 3 kilometers away. She had severe injuries, including serious head trauma and broken arms. She was taken for medical treatment and later admitted to intensive care. She survived for months before dying from her injuries. Her family has demanded justice and answers. Now, this is what still remains unclear. Who attacked Mercy? Where the assault actually happened, who transported her, that is, if she was actually transported, what happened immediately after she left the lounge, why her phone became unreachable, what information her companions may have had, and whether investigators have identified any suspect. As of the public reporting I could verify for this episode, I found no publicly announced arrest or court charge specifically establishing responsibility for Mercy's attack. That does not mean an investigation isn't happening. It means we should not tell listeners that an arrest or conviction exists when we cannot verify one. And that's exactly what Crime Dopers should be about, where crime meets truth, not where crime meets speculation. For Mercy's family, this isn't an intellectual exercise. It's not a mystery they enjoy solving. It's their daughter, their sister, their loved one. Her mother, Zipporah, has been left with questions that no parent should have to ask. Why did Mercy leave that party and never return? Who saw her after her friends left? Why was she found injured by the roadside? Who knew? What happened? Who can explain those missing hours? And perhaps the most painful question of all, could Mercy have been saved if someone had acted sooner? We don't know. And it's important not to pretend we do. But that question is exactly why proper investigations matter. Because justice isn't simply about punishment. It's about reconstructing the truth. It's about giving families an answer. It's about establishing what happened. It's about making sure the same failures don't happen again.
Sisi kama familia tuko na uchungu kubwa sana juu ya mtoto alienda kama hatujui. Seeking justice for Mercy. Juu Mercy alikuwa she was so friendly to people. Mercy ni ngumu sana angekosana na mtu. Ni ngumu sana.
Mtoto wetu anatuuma sana. Hatu kutoka kama tumeongelesha, Mercy ametuongelesha ama sisi tumemuongelesha, hatu kujua amekufa nini.
You know, Crime Dopers, there's something about cases like this that stays with you. Because Mercy's night started so normally. Church, home, a phone call, a birthday party, music, friends, a ride home. And then suddenly, everything changed. And I think that's why we have to be careful when we talk about victims. It's easy to say, why did she go there? Why didn't she leave earlier? Why didn't she take another ride? Why was she alone? But those questions can quietly shift responsibility onto the person who was attacked. The responsibility for violence belongs to the person who commits it. Period. We can talk about safety. We should talk about safety. But safety advice must never become an excuse for violence. Mercy had the right to go to a birthday party. She had the right to try to get home. She had the right to walk along a public road. She had the right to leave. And that brings us to today's Crime Dopers life rule. It's simple. Don't let someone become a missing person case before you start taking their disappearance seriously. If your friends go missing, if they don't arrive home, if their phones suddenly go off, if something about their last known movement doesn't make sense, act. Call. Ask, report, save screenshots, preserve messages, record the last known location, contact the people they were last seen with. And if you have information about a serious crime, don't turn it into gossip. Take it to the appropriate authorities, because the difference between a mystery and an answer can sometimes be one person deciding, I know something and I need to say it. If you know something about Mercy Wanjiru Kimani's final movements, a time, a tunnel launch, the journey along Mombasa Road, or the circumstances in which she was found, please consider reporting that information to the police rather than posting unverified accusations online. And if you're listening to this because you knew Mercy, remember her as more than the circumstances of her death. Remember the person, the daughter, the sister, the friend, the 23-year-old woman whose ordinary Sunday became a tragedy her family is still trying to understand. There's one image I want you to leave this episode with. Not the hospital, not the injuries, not the roadside. The earlier image. Mercy, alive, laughing, celebrating a friend's birthday, because that's where her story began. And somewhere between that celebration and the roadside where she was found, there is a truth that her family is still waiting to hear. Who did this? Why? And what happened during those missing hours? Until those questions are answered, the story isn't finished. I'm Wanjiru. This is Crime Dopers, where crime meets truth. If you found this episode important, share it. Not to spread rumors, not to accuse people without evidence, but to keep Mercy's name in the conversation and to remind anyone who might know something that silence doesn't solve a case. Stay safe, stay aware, stay alert, and I'll see you in the next one.
Crime Dopers. We don't look away.